Well, hello there, and welcome to Plugging Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugging Along, we tried out a new coding tool, Visual Studio Code, with the new LOTRO API extension by Lunarwater. We used it to fix the MinstrelBuff plugin a few ways under the cover, and one very noticeable way for festivals. This time, I'd like to address the last known bug in my head, anyway, with the German client, and then look at the effect list function to see what other inefficiencies it might have. As always, feel free to jump into the chat with your thoughts and questions. And in the meantime, let's bring up our to-do list so we can remind ourselves what was it that we wanted to do. I'm going to go ahead and bring over a Sublime text window. You can use whatever text editor you like. I like Sublime Text. And I'm going to go ahead and open a recent. That's a long list. And here we go. So this is the to-do file in our MinstrelBuff window folder. It's just an easy way to track things that could be a problem. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, that'd be an interesting thing. I don't know if that's a today thing, but that's why it's in the to-do file, so I remember it exists. Okay, so what we're looking at here is, right now, the Soliloquy of Spirit subsystem, if you will, for the MinstrelBuff tracker looks like I don't have this thing loaded. All right, let's go to the plugin manager and load MinstrelBuff. And then we're going to need to be in a blue stance in order to get Soliloquy of Spirit. Excellent. When MinstrelBuff first shows up, it shows up by the upper left. We're going to move its two windows over. And then we can see Soliloquy of Spirit working. I say that, and then I realize I didn't actually tick the Use Soliloquy Tracker. All right. So, really? Well, maybe there's more than one bug. Sweet. All right, let's go ahead and create a new tab that we're going to use to monitor both the emote and standard. And we don't need any of those. Okay. Okay, so the problem as it exists in the German and possibly in the English client is that sometimes we don't notice when you have switched into Soliloquy of Spirit mode. And so if I go ahead and turn that off and turn that on, all right, excellent. So let me demonstrate what was being seen on the German here. If I unload and then reload, now it's working. And I think the problem is we did not notice when the stance change happened. So when the UI first came up, we were in a stance where Soliloquy of Spirit was not trained, but we missed that message that Soliloquy of Spirit became trained. In fact, that's probably going to be, I forget what channel that is. Let's come on in here to Soliloquy of Spirit. Actually, let's check and see where we listen to chat. So we're looking for something called chat received. And we do just want to confine our search to the MinstrelBuff window directory. Oh, sorry, chat dot received. Nope, maybe it'd help if I spelled received correctly. There we go. Okay, so all of our chat's happening in Soliloquy Tracker window. Okay. We have a self chat receive function that we dispatch to. Great. And in that, is that the only chat received we do? Fascinating. Okay. So this is a case of single dispatch. We've overridden the chat.received function with a single function that we're calling in the Soliloquy window. This would have to change if we needed multiple dispatch, if we needed to let multiple components know about the thing happening. But it works well enough for this purpose. Oh, and hello to Little Redhead in chat. Hello. Okay, so we have a chat received function that says check for specialization change. So this is what I think is not working great. So what I want to do is add some debugging here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and say turbine.shell.writeLine. Oh, you know, I just by instinct started coding away in Sublime Text here. But let me go ahead and pull up the new toy, Visual Studio Code, with the new LOTRO API extension. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close a couple of these, but we'll go ahead and we have the to-do file open, and we're going to want the Soliloquy Tracker window open as well. Excellent. Okay, that'll work. In fact, I can move some of that. No, I guess we'll set it there. Okay, so we can go back to chat received. And in check for specialization change, this is where we want to go ahead and do turbine.shell.writeLine and get some sort of debug out here. So first of all, let's check the pattern, make sure the pattern makes sense. So pattern, and I'm going to surround it with a tick so I can verify that there's no trailing spaces that are getting us into trouble, or maybe there are and we want there to be. And we'll concatenate into pattern and then a trailing tick. And that lets us capture the essence of white space a little bit better. Okay, and now we also want a turbine.shell.writeLine. We also want that for the message to check. Now this is going to be a lot of messages. That's okay. This is debug code. We're not going to leave it in here. But same thing though, args.message. I still want to surround it with little ticks just so I can see where the message begins and ends proper. This is a technique I got in the habit of. At some point, I was having a problem with something that had trailing spaces, and I didn't realize it because I just spit out the output, and there was just a line of text, and there was trailing white space that I did not realize was there. And so surrounding it with some sort of character, quotes are an obvious choice, but anything that kind of delineates starting and ending lets you pick up on those hidden characters very easily, even if you're working in a system that doesn't have little symbols for hidden characters. Obviously, some of your more advanced editors will call that out for you, but not when you get down into the console window, or the chat window, I should say. Okay, so we have the message we're checking against the pattern, and then if we get some sort of a match, then we're not doing anything with the results. Great. Okay, let's go ahead and unload and reload. And then we're going to go ahead and change back, what do they call them? Trait configuration. We're going to change our trait configuration. So, okay, I think this window is just a little bit too narrow. Okay, so we can see, oh, why is world message? Oh, I don't want that at all. Hang on. Well, this is very obviously a bug where all messages are getting checked, not just world messages. Never want that to happen. So first of all, we should figure out what channel that was and make sure we're only looking at that channel for those messages. So, and that's something that you really want to do as early as possible when you're in chat received. So if args dot type chat type equals, and then I was hoping for some autocomplete. Oh wait, no, wait, chat type dot. Okay, I don't know what this would be coming under. actually. Okay, I know. First of all, I want to just screen out world here right away. So if args.chat type equals turbine dot chat type dot world, then return end. We're just going to do that. But then we can go ahead and spit out the actual chat type. So then we can say turbine dot shell dot writeline chat type. Oh, we can actually do that in the next function, and it'll be nice and localized. But args.chat type. Great. So let's load this back up, and we're going to go ahead and, oh, that's funny, some kinship chat in there too. I don't want to worry about snooping them, so we're going to come on in here. And same thing. There we go. So we're going to load this up and then do another trait configuration change. Okay, so we can see those are all coming in on channel 14. What is channel 14? Well, I'm not sure. But this new extension does have those values right in there. So if it's not equal to turbine.chatType, now I could just say 14 here, but that's not going to be very friendly for me later on. We can see advancement is number 14, an early guess. So if it's not equal to advancement, then return end. Okay, that's going to be much better. That was not going to be very performant. That was a big oops on my part. Whenever you're doing chat received, always try to just bail out as soon as possible. And if you know which channels you're looking for. Oh, but Soliloquy Spirit itself is going to be in the combat channel. So, and args.chatType does not equal. Hang on. Let me name these things. So, local is advancement equals, and then we can take this. So this is going to be a Boolean. Chat type is equal to advancement. Local is combat equals turbine.chatType dot combat player combat. Great. And then we want if not is advancement and not is combat, then return end. Oh, nice. I don't know if I didn't comment on it, but as we can see here, I did a typo of advancement, so I just said advament, and we can see two things. Because we're using Visual Studio Code, it with the Lua plugin, extension, and by installing the LOTRO API extension, we're getting the Lua extension as part of a dependency, I believe, and by the powers of it doing a parsing of syntax here, we can see it thinks that variable hasn't been used and this variable hasn't been defined, which is great because that tells me I misspelled they're both the same problem. Okay, so that's a way to word this. Now we could actually invert those checks. If it is not advancement, is not combat, and then we can just is not and is not combat, then return. So if it's not either of those two, then return. Now you can do these checks in line. You don't have to declare assign them to a local variable. I am hoping under the covers this is a really fast thing. But if I was really concerned about it, I could go ahead, now that I've worked out the logic and have made sure that I'm happy with it, I can go ahead and substitute this back in. Chat type does not equal to advancement. Great. I might even surround that with extra parentheses. Not sure they're needed. But when did extra parentheses ever hurt anyone? And I'm going to make a new line for this. And same thing. We're going to start with some parentheses and then args.chat type not equal player combat, then return end. So you can do it either way. I don't think it's I don't think it's going to affect performance much to, that's a weird sound my computer made, to spell them out as variables. Ideally, it would be, I would have to do those calculations anyway. But in the back of my head, I think, oh, is this, are we talking registers here? Are we talking stack variables? Is it able to optimize this out? Is it going to optimize this out? And then it's just a headache. So if it's something like this where you can put it into a single statement like this, it's probably the fastest option. But those are probably micro optimizations because we're doing way more complicated things once we go to check for specialization initialization. Okay, so we have message check and pattern. Let's give that a try now that we're not snooping on everything. I can't believe I forgot to filter out my chat monitoring. Okay, and let's go ahead and change our trait configuration again. Great. Now, one thing it's interesting to note is the messages that are coming in have a trailing new line character, and we can see that explicitly because we have surrounded it with those little single quote ticks. You have acquired the trait : space haste period new line, and this is because chat messages do have new lines. That's how you get to the next line. But it's good to know because if we're using a regular expression to check for something in that message, we need to be including that new line and hoping that they don't use different new lines in Germany. Okay, so we have the message, we have the pattern, and then we should go ahead and add in, just for kicks, turbine.shell.writeLine pattern matched exclamation point. Great. In fact, we could even call out RGB equals, sure, FF0000. I don't know if this is how to do a manual RGB, but we're going to try it. Functions that do that for me. Excuse me. Okay, well, that was not the right way to do it, but it does make it easier to see that this is here. Okay. So we can see we got the you have acquired the class specialization bonus, the Watcher of Resolve. You have acquired that. Okay. And what are we looking for? So we're looking for new specialization equals get string. So pattern matched, checking. Again, starting with the ticks, just to make sure we have what we think we have. And we're going to do that get string, Watcher of Resolve. Now this has gotten comically long line here, so we're going to go ahead and split it up into a couple different lines. Even though it's a debug line, I find it useful to be able to see it all in one go, just in case I've done something wrong in my haste here. And I am moving faster than I might otherwise like. Okay, So let's go ahead and trigger the trait changing again. We should not see that message come in because we did not get the watcher. Well, no, we got a trait. And it should have happened pretty early. Okay, that was the watcher of resolve. Oh, timestamps are my friend. Okay, here we go. You acquired class specialization bonus. There we go. Checking the Warrior Scald new line against the Watcher of Resolve new line. Okay, cool. So it looks like instead of stripping the new line off, we're just including it in the thing that we're comparing. Boy, I wish I had an easy way to strip that off. What's my pattern look like? All right. Dot star. I wonder if I could go ahead and put the new line in here. Let's find out. Oh, I would then have to remove it from here. All right, we're gonna try that out. I'm concerned that the dot star is gonna be too greedy for this to work. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and change our trait configuration. Great. We're gonna scroll back up here until the timestamps jump significantly. There we go. All right, you have acquired class specialization bonus, the Watcher of Resolve pattern match, checking Watcher of Resolve against the Watcher of Resolve. Okay, so the dot star was not so greedy as to disrupt the pattern matching. That's very promising. So I'm going to come on in here and add the new line to each of these patterns on the theory that that's what's needed. You know, that's interesting. What do we got here? There's an invisible character for French. That is exciting. Huh. All right, and we're going to remove the new line for the pattern matching. And that's going to make a couple of things. We're going to have an easier time reading these debugs. And possibly will cause problems not pop up. Okay, so we have seen good things. But, you know, I am feeling like color in the output would be useful to call out the ones we actually care about. So if I come on in here to LOTRO Learning Online, plugins, oh, I don't have it here. Sorry, documents, plugin along, plugins, and then coming into Cube plugins, that's me, dtracker, and then probably general functions. Let's go ahead and find a debug function. All right. So, oh, there's supposed to be a octothorpe in there. All right, we can do that. Okay. So, it should look like this. Great. Water says, Octothorpe, I know I'm a classicist. That's my controversial opinion for the night. We should go back to just calling it Octothorpe. Okay, let's go ahead and switch trait configurations again. And, sweet, now that's much easier to just see visually where the one that we care about is. And the reason why I don't want to get rid of all the quote-unquote unnecessary debug statements right now is that I think they're going to be very helpful when I switch over to the German client to see what's going on, if anything, what's not working. And because there's like a 30-second cooldown, like you can't bit back and forth between trait configurations like mad. I would like to not have to do that too many times to find the problem if there is one. All right, pattern match, checking the Warrior Scald against the Warrior of Resolve. Okay, great. That's exactly what we would expect. That should not work. And then let's come back over to the Watcher of Resolve configuration. Find the red. What? Where are you? Up there we go. Watcher of Resolve against Watcher of Resolve. Hooray! We're in the right configuration. So now, although my chat window is on top of it, we can see that the soliloquy of spirit detection is live. Great. Water is starting their vote for some variation on hash. Hashtag, hash symbol. I guess. I mean, a pound symbol sounds kind of crass. So I think I'll stick with Octothorpe. Okay. So this is all good, and we can see we are having still to parse all those combat messages, but notice if I put Soliloquy of Spirit on me, and then I switch back out of Watcher of Resolve, we should stop seeing. There we go. Let me scroll on down here. Yeah, I was going to say, we should stop seeing this. Why are we still seeing this? Where are we caring about this? All right, where is in Watcher Resolve? Oh, I see. We're checking for specialization changed. You know, I'm regretting my early decision to do all of this checking first. I feel like each thing should be checked independently. So, for instance, if arg.chat type equals advancement, then end. And here we can go ahead and, keyboard shortcut for moving a line is different. We can go ahead and come on in, and if it's advancement, then we can check for specialization changed. If, and this is what I wanted to have this combination, if it's equal to player combat and self dot is in Watcher of Resolve, then do a thing. Although in this case, instead of returning, we're going to actually do the function, the check for soliloquy. All right, so that was a case of not really thinking through the implications of what was going on here. What's with all this squiggly? Oh, okay, it's source control integration. Cool. So, yeah, bailing out early was great, but instead of that, and we can do an else if. Bailing out early is good, but surrounding the stuff that we want to do with the check for that specific channel that it applies for feels even better, because here we can do two metaphorical birds with one code-based stone. We can check for the chat type and are we in Watcher Resolve stance. And only if both of those are true, then we're going to check for the Soliloquy of Spirit. And we won't process every, we won't process every combat message through check for specialization change now, which is going to be way better because we don't want to do that. And this is a case where having all these debug messages allowed us to see that we were getting more than we meant to. All right, so let's go ahead and unload and reload that MinstrelBuff. We're going to come on in here, change our trait configuration. Baz asks, what would be more efficient? Those if statements or putting those functions in a table with the chat channels as keys? That's an interesting question, Baz. And we're running up against the edge case where I don't have a firm grasp of what's really going under the covers for Lua. But in general, when I think table access in Lua, I think it's probably implemented with some sort of a hash table. And we're using numbers in this case as lookup keys, but you can use arbitrary data types as lookups. And so hopefully under the covers they do something different for numbers, but you're still doing a lookup, which is order n in a hash table. Is it order n or order 1? I want to say it's... Okay, sorry. Probably order 1. It's been a while since I've done my algorithm analysis class. It's probably order 1, but it's still probably multiple operations to get from you have a key and a table and you're accessing the thing out of it versus just checking a Boolean value or computing and checking Boolean value. So I don't know. It's something that was probably worth testing. I suspect either way we go with that, table lookup or comparing two numbers against each other, like those are way faster than checking every message, right? The big heavy load here is the regex. I should say the pattern matching. The pattern matching is hundreds of CPU cycles, right? Even if it has an early out, dozens of CPU cycles. The check for one number against a number or possibly looking up in a table, super fast. In my mind, anyway. But this is one of those cases where you should definitely not assume how anything works unless you really know the underpinnings of the language. Yeah, testing is great. If you can find a way to test the thing that you're trying to do a few thousand times, time it each way, that can give you a more concrete sense of how it works on your machine. But it's a very interesting question. I do actually use table presence or not in some other places. I mean, the real question is, you would be... unless you had an entry in the table for every chat type, which is a long list of empty functions or nil. I mean, you're checking that entry in the table either exists or not, or the thing that is there is nil or not, or you're running a bunch of empty functions, and that doesn't make sense. So you're throwing an extra nil check in there, which is also pretty fast, but it makes me think the table thing, since we're not doing something we're not dispatching to every chat channel. It's probably more effort than it's worth. But it's a really interesting question. Thanks for throwing that out there. As says, in this case, I would use the table lookup thing if you're using a ton of chat channels so the code does not look too elaborate. I think that's a really interesting point. In this case, because I feel like chat monitoring is probably one of the most expensive things a plugin can do, other than just... I don't know. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Unless you're just going through every item like Lunar Water was doing in a plugin, like going through every item and getting information about it. Chat monitoring, especially when you're in combat, feels like the most expensive thing you can do. So anything you can do to dial that down a little bit, even at the expense of code readability, that might actually be enough bang for the buck to justify it. Strew comments liberally. Leonardo says, challenge accepted. If you can find something more expensive than scanning items, let me know. Yeah, so that's a case where code clarity, you might even sacrifice a little bit if you are saving some cycles on every message and you're getting hundreds of messages in a very short order. So that's a thought I have. Comments can make up in code clarity a lot, where just a few lines would otherwise be superior. That says interacting with target effects is not good in terms of performance. Fair enough. All right, I'll leave it to the viewing audience to figure out what's the least performant thing a plugin can do. Okay, so we have some good output messages. I wish I could kill that new line before it hits here, because it's really distracting me to have these things doubling up like that. I mean, I believe I could. Substrings are also expensive. It's fine. Baz says all the problems for target effects are on the game side, not the Lua side, so not sure if it counts. Well, interesting question. I guess the thing is, if the plugin doing a thing means the game is running at fewer frames per second than it otherwise would, right? Like, if your game would be running at 30 frames per second, but because your plugin is doing the thing, now it's running at 25 frames per second, I guess that would be my key measurement of how unperformant a plugin is. So if you're doing Lunar Water's item scanning and your frames per second goes from 30 to 2, I would say that's very unperformant. So really, yeah. File interactions, like if you do a load or unload of a plugin and everything kind of pauses for a second, well, you get a fresh Lua in memory and unload all those files in that. Like that's not very performant, but that feels like an exception, right? Like unless you have a plugin that never finishes loading, I'm really just talking about the running part of the lifespan. And yeah, you can DTracker is not very performant in how it redraws the UI way more than it needs to, and that kills performance for about a second. Okay, so we have the messages we need, and we're seeing this work in the English side of things. Now we saw it not work the very first time. So what I want to do here is ask myself, was that just a glitch, a weird thing, or what was going on? I don't know. If I don't have use Soliloquy Tracker, we can see we're not even processing those chat messages. Awesome. If I do have Soliloquy Tracker on, well, that's interesting. Right, because we are processing them in a different function. Cool. And if I change over here, I have no more Soliloquy Spirit to play with, but we can see we're not getting those comment messages. So this is already an improvement. We're already processing way fewer messages. Now, most pattern matching systems should bail out early. The very first character that they meet, that they can say, no, this pattern does not match, they should bail early. So this shouldn't be, we have to check every character in the string for every message kind of deal, but regex style pattern matching is still kind of cycle heavy. So the less we can do, the better. Okay, so this is going to be a multi-language hopping stream. So the next thing we need to do is exit out of this client and come in on the French client and try to replicate what we've done here. German client first, and make sure that we can get the Soliloquy Tracker happening. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the exit game button. Now, in my system, that does often take a second or two. It was really interesting. Like when I see this, I mentally think, I feel like somewhere in the LOTRO code base, they are freeing memory, closing down all their resources, but possibly they're going through and releasing all the memory that their objects have, so they don't have quote unquote any memory leaks. But then I think, well, Raymond Chen, a blogger, has a lovely analogy of you're basically painting the walls right before you move out, and they come and demolish your house. Like there's no need to go through and release. Just be done. Just say I'm done. And let the OS reclaim all that memory, which is going to do anyway. Like file handles, network handles, these are good things to close, but memory, just let it be. And the fact that it takes my computer just a minute or so to finish closing LOTRO down makes me think that there's a lot of memory release happening there. Okay, so remember that in order to change client languages, you have to be at the launcher. Then you click this little button that says EN, and you pick your target language. We're going to go with Deutsch, which I hear they speak in Deutschland. And we're going to come on in and apparently let it patch again. I did this earlier, I thought. Maybe there was another patch? Maybe I just forgot. Okay, and my shortcut has the username and password built in, so I don't have to think about it. And here we go. Okay, so we're going to spielen over onto Treebeard. And Herr der Ringe online. Dutch is one of the few languages that got away with some noticeable differences in translations. Most Lord of the Rings translations have that variation of the Lord of the Rings, and then in Dutch it's in de Ban van de Ring, which is like under the influence of the ring. It's just like the Lord's just out, right? Like, no Lord. It's very interesting. Okay, we're gonna come back in with Affadel, Bard der Hobbit. Now, it is possible if you have multiple accounts on your machine to have multiple clients running with different languages. We've seen that a little bit in the past. That's a little bit rough on my laptop to do that while streaming. But if you're not playing on a VIP server, if you're just playing on a regular server, Evernight's my go-to non-VIP server. I might have multiple accounts, one in English, one in French, one in German, and be working on them all simultaneously. And that kind of speeds up the development checking of, okay, it works in English, does it work in these other languages? And so I would recommend investing in a couple of quote-unquote throwaway accounts that you can use on something like Evernight or Brandywine or Landerval, any of the non-VIP servers, and that way you can be in on each of the three languages. Make a change, unload the plugin, reload the plugin, do the thing on all of them, and not have to switch back and forth. That being said, here we are in the German. Let's go ahead and come on into our Satz module manager and load MinstrelBuff. Great. Now, we are not in our De Wachter der Entschlossheit stance. So yeah, let's change over. Now, other thing I don't see is much red. So that's a concern. And we can see we do not seem to be getting our soliloquy of spirit going. So that's probably a sign that our message is not correct. Let's come on in to the soliloquy tracker window. No, I'm sorry, to the strings, and get a sense of what is it that we're looking for. Ihr habt diese Bonus-Eigenschaft für Kostenspecial erlangt. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, that is the pattern. I should probably just print that pattern out once. That is getting distracting. All right. So that pattern is here. I'm going to yoink that and put it into the next function up. Oh no! Okay, we'll put it really far up. I just want to spit it out once, just as a reminder of what I'm looking for. All right. We're going to come on in here. Great. Okay. Let's go ahead and unload and reload. Coming down here to the bottom. That's the message. Great. Come on back. Okay. Did I not save my file? I did not save my file. File saved. Oh, thanks, Moobot. LOTRO code is on we go. Quite possibly a double clicks reference. No, probably not. Okay, let's go ahead and do another Eigenschafts configuration. Great. That's a lot less spammy, I would call that. Okay, so the pattern itself, ihr habt diese Bonus-Eigenschaft. Great. So this looks very plausible here. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and bring it into the strings, where we can take a look at it and say, what's going on here? What's going on? Okay, that is the same thing as what I saw before. Cool. Oh, interesting. No. I mean, I say it's interesting, but what's going on here? Well, I guess the question is this a problem with my pattern matching, or is this a problem with the UTF-8 characters here? We've got the little A with the umlauts over them, for instance, and the U. So is this a case where that is breaking us? And we have a way to check for that. So remember, on a previous stream, we created a little utility that just goes through and takes all the UTF characters and writes them back out as ASCII codes. And so we're going to come on in here to plugins, MinstrelBuffs, and that's in the MinstrelBuff window. And we're going to go ahead and do convert files. And then that gives us strings -ASCII. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of back this up as strings UTF-8 and take the strings ASCII instead. All right, let's come take a look. Whoops. Oh, it really doesn't like that. What's going on here? Let me just close that and reopen it. Okay. Nothing like ripping a file out from underneath a parser to make it unhappy. Okay, and here we can see the U umlaut and the A umlaut have been swapped out. Same thing down here. And so that may give us a different result. So we're going to go ahead and, well, let's change configurations here. Yeah. And then go ahead and unload and reload and see if that's just our problem. I wonder how much server interaction there is when you change your trait configuration. And maybe that's just to prevent you from hammering the server by swapping back and forth. All right, let's go ahead and change. Okay, well, good news, I guess, is that didn't fix it, which is nice. Why didn't it fix it? What's going on here? All right, since that didn't fix it, I'm going to go ahead and swap back to the other strings. Strings ASCII can just live right there, because I do find it a little bit easier to deal with the strings file in UTF-8. What? No, go there. Oh, I see. Okay, so this is the thing that we want. Just in case there's anything weird going on with the characters. And then parentheses dot star. My next step is to go to an online regex tool and see if there's anything else going there. But we'll start with just copy pasting from the chat log to see, was there a white space difference? Then Water asks, new line perhaps? Absolutely possible. In fact, all of these explicitly have a new line because they are a chat message, and the last character in a chat message is the thing that puts you on the next line, which is frustrating. Okay, we've reloaded that. Let's go ahead and swap on over. You know, it's funny. I feel like there's an optimization to be had here where if you find a specialization message, then you can just stop looking for the next 30 seconds because you can't get another one that matters in that amount of time. But optimizing a thing that only happens once every 30 seconds is you know, one of those polishing the brass knobs on the Titanic kind of thing. Like, you can do it, but is that a good use of your time? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and, why not, unload, reload, get that little stamp here, and come on into our blue line. Okay. Well, we're definitely not getting a match, and that's confusing to me. So, let me see, do I have a tool for this? Let me go ahead and pop open a browser window. I had a pattern viewer. Let's pop that open and see if it sheds any light on this. So my pattern is this. There's a hyphen. There's a hyphen. Hyphens are special characters. Oh. Okay. Germans. No. Percent. Thank you, Baz. This is one of my weaknesses in Lua is because its pattern matching is different from any other pattern matching that I do. I have to kind of refresh my memory every time I get into it. So, as Baz has pointed out into chat, a percent sign will escape. Awesome. Oh, so that's the only problem I see. Let's see if escaping our hyphen is going to fix this problem. And that would certainly explain why the French perhaps worked where the German did not. All right. Hyphens. But I cannot sing the praises of this pattern matching tool enough. Just spitting this in here was enough to say, oh, there's something going wrong here. And I didn't have to think about it that hard. All right, let me go ahead and actually paste a link into chat for anyone who hasn't used that particular tool before. Baz says, pattern matching is the bane of my existence too. I just made a whole tool that uses it and ran into a million issues. Yeah, I get that. Okay, so I have saved. Let's save again just to be sure. All right, come out, come in. There's an old saying. Attributed to all sorts of different people, and not originally about Reddit regex, but it works. You know, some people, when confronted a problem, think, "Oh, I'll use regular expressions." Now they've got two problems. That works for Lua pattern matching too. Okay, so loaded, unloaded, great. Let's start this cooldown. How long is that anyway? It seems about 30 seconds. Okay, well then I'll get another drink. All right, my goal is to not run too late tonight because I have pizza calling my name. All right, so we're ready to change traits. We have reloaded the plugin. Let's give it a try. Oh, I saw red. I saw red. Excellent. Pattern matched. Yeah! Which means it works. Okay, so let that be a lesson to me and perhaps any of you who weren't screaming the solution at your monitor for the last 20 minutes. If you're doing pattern matching, maybe run your pattern by a pattern checker first, if you're having problems with the pattern, before assuming anything else is broken with your code. Just like, is the pattern good? Does it have weird stuff going on? Hyphens. I should have caught that. Like I said, it's been too long since I've really dug into the pattern matching. Okay. Neat. So as we can see, clear stuff out here, make this chat window smaller. When we use Soliloquy of Spirit on ourselves, I don't suppose anyone else is in range, as we look down onto the Town Hall of Bream, that's okay. So we can see everything's working great. We're able to identify the pattern, and let's see. I'm not actually spitting out the combat messages anymore. But if I were to go ahead and change stances here, we would stop looking at those messages. Now, a thing about the Soliloquy of Spirit subsection is it does not use the effects list. It just says, hey, this thing lasts for 45 seconds. So when I see it go out, I'll start a 45-second timer, and then it's done. So there's no checking with the system to see, am I correct? But it's usually correct enough for our purposes. And that's the thing that I've been thinking of, is the effects list scanning feels like an intensive activity. And, well, I wouldn't necessarily want to get rid of it entirely. I'm not entirely convinced it's necessary or good or any of those things. So it's in my thought that if you didn't want to know about anthems that other minstrels were placing on you, then you could just say, don't use the effects list, and instead just monitor. Of course, chat parsing is probably worse than effects list monitoring. I don't know. You could just monitor the combat player combat log for those things happening and start timers off of those. We're already looking at the combat as the thing, so I don't know. That's one of those things where I'd want to time it and actually do measurements, because effects list seems, it feels like the effects list changes all the time in combat, but sometimes there's only like 10 or 20 items, so scanning through them, every time that changes versus scanning every combat message and checking for, is this an anthem, is this a ballad? I don't know, but it's in my head. It's one of those things. Okay. Awesome. Let's check French. Spielverlassen. Yeah, that sounds about right. Baz says, effects list events are fine for yourself or players as long as you don't touch target effects list, you're fine. Well, accuracy-wise, I feel like that's true. I'm wondering about performance-wise. Like, if we're told every time the effects list, if an effect is added, changed, or modified, they change a lot, right? Like, I get a new effect or lose an effect all the time in combat. So that function is being called, if not multiple times a second. Okay, best things performance-wise, even with all the textual matching, is this thing, one of the anthems? Yeah, maybe so. The good news is that's what the current system is. So if that's a good system, then we're doing well. All right, let's pop on open Lord of the Rings online client launcher. And remember that we're going to use the button up here. It currently says DE. We're going to switch that over to Francois, which they speak in Francois land. No, don't do that. Okay, and we'll bring up a launcher that already knows my password, and we'll be good to go. Great. Jour. All right. So, French Lord of the Rings is coming on up. Entrer. Oh, thank you. Water has been delivered. All right. Looks like our chargements are almost full. Judgment. Something like that. Okay. The chickens have escaped into the maze, apparently. Nice. La poulette. Okay, we're going to come on in here and make sure our MinstrelBuff is running. Now, I can stumble my way through the pronunciation of some German words, but I'm going to stop trying with French because I don't want to insult all the French people. My language is better than me. Okay, so we have a MinstrelBuff, and we're gonna swap on over. We. Okay, I'll do we. And then I saw a red flash by, and we can see. Fascinating. Oh, that's weird. In French, the target name, if it's targeting you, is personnel. Is this a known thing? Hang on a sec. Hang on. I gotta check this out. Okay, so well, that's funny. Okay, so where are we? We are at target change, get target, no, get name. Wait a sec. Oh. So, Oh. 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 The name of the soliloquy, or the name of all the healing effects, changes if you're in, depending on what stance you're in. And so it's picking up the personnel of Esprit de Soliloquy personnel. Okay, cool. So that's fun. Let's go ahead and copy this off. So in the French, and this should be in all of them, but in the French, okay, cortiche. We're observing the cortiche here. Avec. Ooh. Oh, that's sad. What's a good way to absorb that personnel in the pattern matching? I'm not sure there is a good way to absorb that. Now, an approach is when we're taking the name, we could go ahead and say, hey, if it starts with personnel, maybe check if we're in French first. If we're in French and it starts with personnel, just drop that. Usually I'm used to it being within the body of like Esprit de Soliloquy, so we could go ahead and just absorb it with a dot star here. But with a trailing like that, I'm not used to pattern matching. Pattern matching have the concept of this chunk is optional, just like this character is optional. Yeah, okay. Well, the good news is almost no one would care about this plugin and be in dissonance stance. Oh, jeez. So if I come in and I'm not in dissonance stance, it works great. But if I am in dissonance stance, which I often am as a minstrel, yeah, that's it right there. Okay, so get name. No, this is still the chat received. And we're checking for Soliloquy of Spirit. Ewok asks, why is your game in French? Well, that's one of the delightful things about being a plugin developer is There are 3 official language clients for Lord of the Rings Online. There's the English, the German, and the French. And so oftentimes a plugin doesn't need to care about that too much. Save files are an obvious place. If you're saving decimal numbers, you have to pay attention to that if you want to be friendly to people who play in multiple languages. But if you are ever looking at chat messages, as I am doing here, I am parsing combat chat messages to see, hey, did the player use Soliloquy of Spirit? Bonk. I don't have a good way to do that. I don't think. Actually, I might. No, I don't have a good way to do that and know who the Soliloquy of Spirit was targeted on without looking at the chat monitoring. But the message that comes out is, of course, in French. And so my client's in French right now so that I can check the combat chat messages. And this is actually a bug right here. It's supposed to have my name in it, but in dissonant stance, in French, the name change of the ability includes the form personal at the end of it, which I just didn't take into account. So the client's in French, so I can experience the plugin as a French player would. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so we have a player name equals this. If player name is not null, then if the client is French and the minstrel is in dissonance stance, then don't include personnel in the name. Oh, as Little Redhead points out in chat, plugins are definitely not required to play Lord of the Rings online. But there's lots of cool plugins. In fact, maybe Little Redhead will do the plugins command and list out some of the stream team's favorites. There's a lot of plugins that do a lot of things, from Thorough Lore's reminders plugins, where you can just be like, which character still needs to go get my universal ingredient crates, or I need weekly reminders for my jeweler to go craft tier 6 materials because we're on Treebeard and not all of my characters have their jewelry yet. Stuff like that, right? Like, just super basic reminder system. Well, I shouldn't say super basic, but a super awesome in-game system where you can set up notifications to say, let me know when this happens. 1 week passes, 4 days passes, this quest is ready again. All kinds of things like that. So from the utilitarian like that to combat related ones, all sorts of fun stuff. Ewok says, don't really know anything about LOTRO. You're a WoW classic purist. You'd be willing to try. Yeah, the one I'm working on today is called MinstrelBuffs, and it's targeted towards minstrels, and it is a very useful way to visualize, sorry, wrong stance. It's a very useful way to visualize minstrels in Lord of the Rings Online are a main healing class, and they have 2 types of things that can persist. They're ballads and they're anthems. Ballads can only last for 9 seconds if you're not in combat right now. And your anthems can last for a minute or 2 depending on your gear. Oops. There we go. But you can't bring out your anthems without your ballads, and your ballads, anyway, it's a whole thing. And so this UI is specifically targeted towards this one class to give you a little bit better sense of what's the state of my ballads and my anthems, and how long have I been out of combat, and all this good stuff. And a subsystem that I added is this tracker of how many soliloquies, because each stack up to 3 of Soliloquy of Spirit gives a buff to the recipient where they are healing, but also increases their physical and tactical mitigation. And I was finding myself during, I want to say it was an event during the Yule Festival, I was finding myself really wanting to make sure that the tank had all 3 stacks of this on. And I was finding it very difficult to make sure that was happening while doing everything else in combat as a healer. So I was like, well, hey, why don't I just have a plugin that shows me how many are there? And it snowballed from there. So Treebeard is the perhaps the closest thing we have to a WoW Classic. It's still the same code, the same everything as the other servers, but the content has been artificially gated to, at first, only be what was initially released in the Shadows of Angmar 15 years ago, and now we're up to the Mines of Moria content. But it's not the WoW Classic experience in the sense that they haven't recreated the old environment. They haven't gone back and said, "Oh, you don't get a clock on your radar. You don't get all these things." So yeah, any bug fix that goes on a live servers, we get it too. Any new feature that goes on a live server or standard server, we get it too. So it's not really classic, but it's about the closest thing that LOTRO has to a classic. Okay, so how do we check if this is French? Well, in our strings, we have a getString function, and we have a client language. Excellent. What does client language look like? Oh, I'm going to go ahead and delete this strings.ascii. It is just throwing me off. Okay, so client language. It is in lowercase. It's fine. We have a client language, and we can compare that to FR. Great. So we can say if client language equals FR, then end. Why are you gray? Oh, because it's empty. Great. Oh, Ewoks, perfectly understand. Awesome. Well, if you do decide to try out Lord of the Rings Online, I can't remember if it's happened yet, but they are increasing how much of the content is freely available to all players, regardless of whether they pay any money or if they're free to play. So pretty much, I think, when that happens, and I can't remember the exact date, free-to-play accounts will have, I think, all the content up to level 100. And the current cap is 140. It takes you all the way through the story through Mordor and Mount Doom, I think. I'd have to check the exact details, but now is a good time to be getting into Lord of the Rings Online if you like exploring the world of Middle-earth and also like not having to spend a lot of money to do that. Okay, so if the client language is French, should be a super fast check, a couple of numbers against each other. Then what I really want to do is strip off that personnel. And for that, it'd be nice to know if the string starts with it, I guess. All right, so Lua strings.sub, that sounds great. Show me a substring function. A weakness I have is the library is not my strength. All right, so, string.sub. String ij. Great. So if player name sub 1, and then this is what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oops. Now, it's entirely possible the player's name could actually be personnel, but not with a space, I think. So I don't actually need to check the length of it. Okay, I feel better about that. Okay, now I need to check my numbering. Oh, Edelwith has a Slack message. Oh, thanks. Hello, Edelwith. Welcome to chat. Okay, so other thing that I'm conscious of is, first of all, I'm pretty sure strings are, and all stuff is 1 indexed instead of 0 indexed. Let's see if they have an example here. All right, 2. Yeah, so that's the first, that's the second. Great. And this is from the ith to the jth character inclusive. Okay, so other thing that I will sometimes do is just go ahead and count it out just to make sure I understand what's going on. Let's see. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So I am happy that that is the right spacing, but it wouldn't hurt to do a little debugging. So turbine.shell.writeLine, and we've got actually. Let's just call this out as a variable right now. Local first 10 equals. Now, I don't know what happens if you're extending beyond the end of the string. Hopefully it just gives you the whole string. So, first 10, we're going to call that great. And then local remainder equals player name sub 11, and we can spit that out as well. Great. That'll give us a sense of what's going on here, just in case it doesn't work off on the first attempt. And sometimes it does, but hey. So we see the first 10 personnel. What we don't see is if there's a space at the end there. And that's my bad. I was just talking about this earlier. Let's go ahead and include a single quote to surround the item, and that'll help us tell if there's any white space that has slipped through the cracks in a way that we didn't intend. So we're going to unload, we're going to load, we're going to bring it back up. Awesome. And we can see the first 10 were personnel with a space, and then the remainder is affidil without a space. That's awesome. If I change stances here, we should be using the same one. Ah, yes, so good. And if I come back to dissonant stance, should be no problem. Awesome. Okay, so that actually worked the first time. I was hopeful. So I'm going to delete the comments here. The right line. I don't need to assign these to variables. I don't think it's a performance issue, but I don't really want to hinder just in case. So checking the first 10 characters, is it personnel? Then if it is, go ahead and strip that out and use the remainder. Because we're checking with a space, and we shouldn't ever get a space in a player name like that, I feel pretty good that we're not going to accidentally, there won't be someone whose player name is personnel, and then that'll be a problem. Fingers crossed. Okay. If the client is French and the minstrel is in dissonant stance, then don't include personnel in the name. Great. Is that it? Oh, well, I was going to say we should make sure that works in German, but we were in dissonant stance in German. Meins or des. Yes, because it was inside the name of the ability, we were able to swallow up the difference between my spirit, the soliloquy of my spirit, and just soliloquy of spirit. We could swallow that up with a dot star pattern, and it worked okay. We do the same thing in English, or we just swallow up any extra stuff there and continue on with spirit. But because the personal was at the end of it, I couldn't think of a good way to do that with a pattern matching, so we're just doing it in code. If this game had dozens of client languages, I don't think that would be a great solution. But it might still have to be a solution, right? Like, there's only so much you can do with pattern matching. So that is fine. And we documented what was going on here. So future us should understand what's going on. In fact, we can say why it's necessary. This personnel comes at the end of the skill name, so it does not seem possible to handle this in the pattern. So if future me or someone else comes up with a way to handle this in the pattern, even better. Okay. What else do we have? We have a to-do file. So, stance change detection code might not be correct for German, only because pattern matching is hard. Okay. Bam. So, let's come on into the README file. All right. Fixed stance change detection code for German. Great. Now at this point, it looks like I do not have my source control utility up. So let's bring up, I use the fork program, which is a wrapper around a Git repository, and it takes a moment to load on up. All right. So, local changes. There's a file in here that's been put in place by Visual Studio Code. On the one hand, maybe it's useful to have it in here. On the other hand, I almost feel like I should add it to the ignore file, which is a file that says, don't worry about this. I don't have a strong opinion on that, so VS Code stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and commit it. Cool. So, now we can look at the actual changes that we have. So this was stance change detection in German. Oh, but we also did fixed dissonance stance soliloquy of spirit name detection for French. And I didn't even know that was a problem. Which may mean there's not a lot of French players, French minstrels, standing around in dissonant stance using soliloquy of spirit. Maybe. Okay, so what do we have? Oh, cool. We still had some debug output here in the main.lua. Don't need that anymore, I feel. So I'm just going to get rid of it. All right, options window. We don't need that right now. So we're going to go ahead and split out these changes into two pieces. So there's the German one, which is the strings change. Okay. There's two things going on here, and I would like to capture them differently. So I'm going to come back into strings and remove the new line character for just a moment, so that I can capture the hyphen fix. And then, let's see, oh, there's stuff in here I need to get rid of. Okay. So, fix stance change detection code for German. And our to-do file is updated. And here's just the one thing we had to do. Escape that hyphen. Okay. Now, we can come back in here and put that new line back, and now we can come into strings and say, don't include new line when matching soliloquy spirit target name. No, that's not it. Don't include when matching I'm going out of my mind. What are those things called? Specializations. Matching specialization names. Okay. And that's just these three here. So we can include that, but also this down here. Now this isn't a client, a player-facing change. No one's ever going to know about it. It was just a convenience for us. So I don't feel like that needs to go into the README file. All right, we do have a couple of more changes in here. Okay. In the README, and this is something I handled offline because it kept on bothering me. Fixed error message when whispering an offline player. And what happened was we would get a null message and not realize it. Now this might be fixed by the channel issue, but if the args.message equals nil, then we're just going to drop out. And since this is in check for specialization changed, it is unlikely to be a performance issue anyway. So we're going to go ahead and just include this, but not anything else yet. Okay, awesome. All right, fixed error message when whispering an offline player. Great. In fact, I'm going to yank that for the snapshot message, the commit message. Okay. What other changes are there? Fixed dissonance stance, soliloquy spirit, name detection for French. That's a mouthful. But when I come into soliloquy tracker window, I notice that there's still some debug code in here. So if I go into turbine.shell.writeLine, we can see we're still doing message to check. We can still see a pattern matching here. Okay, that fixed a lot. Oh, and we see we're doing better filtering of messages. That's definitely client-facing or player-facing. Fixed, updated chat monitoring to only check messages from advancement and player combat channels. Okay, so in fact we can just use that. All right, we're going to stage that, and that came in just this function here. Awesome. Now this is a nice process to go through where we can just break apart the different changes we've been making, put them into little discrete chunks, and then if it turns out later one of them was wrong, it's very easy to figure out what changes were associated with that one chunk as best as we can do. Every once in a while I make a mistake and I don't commit everything in one go, but by doing it in little small discrete chunks like this, it just makes my my future self a little bit happier. All right, here we have fixed dissonance stance, name detection for French. Awesome, let's do it. And that is here. And this is documenting what it looks like. All right, so each of those commits that affected or was visible to a player went into the README file. And so kind of by definition, our README file is up to date. I'm going to push those changes out so a sudden catastrophic my computer failure isn't a problem in this regard. Okay, so now we have an up-to-date README file without really having to work very hard at it. Just each time we made a commit, if it affected a player or was visible to the player in some way, add it to the README, commit it at the same time. This, to me, feels much easier than trying to go back through my memory. It's like, what did I change? Or just compare all the code between two different versions. Like, what does this do? How does this matter? So building up the README file as we go, super convenient for future me who has to then tell people what changed. because I can just refer to this and be like, oh, those are the 5 things that have changed. Neat. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to look at, if we have time, we do have a little bit of time left. Awesome. Actually, while I talk about that, I am not going to be able to proceed with the French client for too much longer. So, assuming no objections, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this sucker. Quitter le jeu. And bring up the English client instead, where if something goes wrong, I'll have a little bit easier chance figuring out what it was. Well, if you are listening at home and working on your own plugin or coding project, don't feel like you have to stay on topic. If you want to talk about what you're working on at home, feel free to mention that in chat as well. Underwater, I know you've got all sorts of exciting stuff going on, but I know you're probably also at work, given your time zone. It is responding. It's just responding very slowly. All right. So one of the side effects of Lord of the Rings Online being 15 years old is I'm pretty sure it is a single-threaded application. And that means if it's busy doing something, there is no UI responsiveness until it finishes doing the thing. And you'll see that mostly when you're shutting down the application, because at that point it doesn't care about pumping UI messages. But yeah, every once in a while you're like, oh, if this game were being written now instead of 15 to 20 years ago, the game might not be doing this exact behavior right now. Oh, I forgot to change the language. Baz says, I'm giving things in my plugins different colors because playing around with Lunar Water color utility in VS Code is too much fun. Oh, I know, right? I love how that thing looks. Oh, let me remember to change to English. I'm going to hit go again. I know what that button should be. Click it. I'll pull that up while the application's launching here in a moment. This is another reason why I like to have all 3 different languages up at the same time, if possible, is there's this non-zero effort of the game has to make sure its files are up to date and good, and that's great normally, right? But when you're switching languages back and forth, it's just that extra delay. So just launch them all, test them all simultaneously, if your computer can handle that. All right, so let me see if I can make that happen. So turbine.ui.color, and if I go ahead and just say 0, 0, 0, then that populates up the. Oh, let me forward through that. Sorry, I shouldn't say pre-populates. That provides a UI element that then lets you come in and play around with things. So if I want that to be partially visible, and let's bring us into the yellow. Oh, yeah, sure, that's great. Then we can see the values down here are updating live, the opacity and the red, green, and blue values. Hello, Raiders! You have caught us switching client languages. We just finished up checking how the MinstrelBuff plugin works in French and German, and are now coming back into English. So if you did not know, Lord of the Rings Online supports 3 official languages, and you can change languages up here with this drop-down in the upper right. The UI is still laid out the same way, so if you know where all the buttons are with muscle memory, you can switch the client language and still have a pretty good sense of what's going on. Oh, this button accepts the quest, this button rejects the quest, that kind of thing. So it can be a lot of fun to jump into an officially supported alternate language of the game and see, what's it look like. That being said, your appreciation of all the story in the game might be a little lowered if you don't actually speak French or German, which is why I'm switching back to English. So yes, today I'm looking at the MinstrelBuff plugin, which is a great plugin for minstrels, which helps track your ballads and anthems and how much time you have spent in combat, or when your ballads will expire if you're not currently in combat. We can see, for instance, my major ballads here only have about 3 seconds left. and they're gone. And so that's not a feature that's built into the game by default, but by adding that in as a plugin, we're able to give ourselves a better sense of what's going on with this minstrel. Okay. Specifically, I don't think I want combat anymore. There we go. Specifically, today there were a couple issues with French and German, and we have fixed those. So I was going to go back into code, but first I was just praising Lunar Water here. If you are looking for a color, you can use this new UI element that Lunar Water added to the LOTRO API extension for Visual Studio Code. That's a mouthful. So if I come into extensions here, we see the LOTRO API. Thank you, Lunar Water. Have I not rated? Oh, I need an account. Never mind. I'll have to fix that later. I'm not logged in. So pop this open. It's like if I want something more in the blues, I can come here. I can click that. We get a little preview render in this box, which is just lovely. And also all of the values for that are substituted in. And my understanding is if you hit on one of the predefined values like this, then we just get a substitution in here of that value, turbine.ui.color to black, instead of the 000 that it was, which is, I think, 99% lovely. I do wonder, is there a way to convert it back? I guess not. You just have to come in and alter this just a little bit. Yep. Okay. and now you get your numbers back if it's time to change them. Or if you have it all black, but then dial down the opacity just a little bit, then it'll spit out all the numbers back. So it's really fantastic. I wonder, is there a way to like convince it I want just all red? Nope, that didn't work. But it's pretty red. Let's see. So if I go red 0, 0, does this get automatically converted? Obviously, this is the first time I've been playing with it. How do I get it to accept? Oh, control click. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so how do I... Okay, so we're here, and then control click. I think you did not mean for me to control click the box. No? Hang on. Control click black. Oh. No. Water. All right, so I'm holding down control. I clicked. That is not it. I am clicking on red. Did you mean up here? What about down here? Nope. Okay. Well, you know, it's still delightful. And as I said, if you need the values, if you've done something like a color dot Alice blue, but then want to see what those numbers actually are, you can come in here and just dial down the opacity just a teensy bit, and then come back in and get rid of the opacity, and you can see Alice blue 0.94, 0.97, 1. That feels like an off-white to me. Maybe it is. That is just delightful. So if I do 0.5 here, and I come in, and I click here, and scroll it back up. Awesome. Okay. Anyway, so that is the lovely feature that Lunar Water has added to the LOTRO API extension for Visual Studio Code, among many others. That just visually is so cool. I love it. So if you're doing anything with colors in your plugin, hard coding them into your plugin, highly recommend that. Oh, apparently I missed something. If I hover over, I can't tell in order if you're saying I should be able to see the numbers or if that would just be a cool feature. But either way, I will. Wait, what did that say? Click to toggle color options, RGB. Interesting. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it. It's awesome. Now scroll down. Oh, scroll down to that hover. There's a scroll bar? Oh! Sorry, I didn't realize that was a scrollable box. Excellent, Linnerwater, thank you. This is a scrollable box. It's apparently like 130 predefined colors. There's a color table, interesting. And then we can see these. That's lovely. So I'm not doing much with colors in this plugin, but if I were, I would definitely be wanting to use Linnerwater's extension. I still am for other reasons. Okay, so a thing I wanted to look at was the core logic of this plugin is looking at the effect list here. Every time an effect is added, removed, or changed, the plugin is using that to recalculate what should go in this box. And I wanted to take a look at it, and I would encourage, if you are a coder at home and want to look over my shoulder, I'm going to glance at it and say, this feels like the inner loop of the application. Like it's getting called multiple times, if not a second, then at least once every couple of seconds, easy. And I'm wondering if it is doing more work than it needs to. So I'm going to close the Soliloquy Tracker window here and come on into Minstrel. Oh, what is it? Buff window, maybe? Let's find out. And I don't remember exactly what we're looking for, but if we look for an effect list, well, that didn't work. Effect list. Find me that. All right, well, let's look at main.lua. Okay, so we can see the way the plugin is doing this is it's saying it's adding a callback to effects added, effects removed, and effects cleared. And all of those go to the same function. We don't care. Something changed, we're just going to redo everything. And in refresh effect display, which is what we were going to, I think. Hang on. And now that I say that, I wasn't paying enough attention. Okay, effect change callback. An effect change callback is a function that calls refresh effect display. Great. And thus we have dispatched a non-class function to a class function. So we get the self parameter. Lovely. So now that we're in here, why are there 3 problems in here? Sorry. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, I have a custom defined function, and the the parser wasn't picking up on that. That's okay. That's not a now problem. Baz says, what kind of monstrosity is this? Well, I guess that depends. Are you talking about this loop? So what we're looking at, and I have a little familiarity, is you get an effects list from the game. And the author of this plugin believes that those effects are not sorted chronologically. So the first thing that we do in this loop is we copy off what's in the effect list into a new table indexed by a number. So sorted effects 1 is a thing. Sorted effects 2 is an effect. And then I added a little code here. We don't need to worry about that for our analysis purposes. What happens is we sort that list of effects based on time. Now, the sort function is probably order n log n, so not terrible if you have a list of 10 things. We're checking start times. Those are probably internally stored as numbers, not too bad. But we're still talking about a number of operations to sort this table. Now, I added a thing recently because if we're in serious business, I figured, hey, we don't need to do some of this, or at least we can check that we're in serious business and handle that. So if we're checking for serious business, then we'll do some other checks, and maybe we're in serious business or not. Don't need to worry about that. So we copy off the effects into a separate table. And right away, I'm thinking, yeah, do we really do that? Or how much time does it take to copy an effect versus having a table with indices into this other table? But so that's the first thing in my head. In fact, I wonder if I can do side by side. Can I? Ooh, hello. Okay. So, optimization of thoughts. Instead of copying every effect, have list of indices that get sorted? Question mark. Like, we just need to know that, our first one is the 7 winning effects. Our second one is the second winning effects. That kind of thing. But also, we don't care about all the effects. So the first thing we do is sort all the effects, and then we start checking to see if there are effects that we care about. And that seems weird to me. And so the second thing I was thinking is have a list of indices that we care about. Don't sort a bunch of effects. Don't copy and then sort a bunch of effects that aren't relevant. So that's a thought I had. So what else happens? I thought I would like the side by side. I wonder if I can just get a new window. Can I tear that off? No. Okay. I thought I would like the side by side. I ended up hating the side by side. There's a lot of extra width going on there. So we're going to come back in here to Sublime Text, and it is going to have the to-dos. So we're going to come into Plugins. This is in MinstrelBuffs, and we're looking at MinstrelBuff window to do. Okay. I think it's the word wrapping that I really was missing out of here. All right, so above my head, don't copy and then sort a bunch of effects that aren't relevant. So that's a thought I had. And then what else do we have? We have our sorted effects. Sort all of them after we copy all of them. Ignore the serious business. That's a very new addition. So, hello Thurlor. I am looking through the sort of the core loop of the MinstrelBuff plugin, the refresh effect display, which is called every time an effect is added, removed, or changed. And I'm wondering, I'm noodling on some things that could maybe improve performance. As we were just saying, the first thing we do is copy all the effects into a different table and then sort that table and then start checking to see if we care about any of those effects. So for each effect that we have, and we can see here we're mucking about in the buff window. I'd really rather this just be a function that you call in the buff window that says, hide fixed anthems. It's fine. Hey, maybe move this functionality to buff window. So we then go through each of the effects that we copied and sorted to see if we care about it. Thurlor says, I believe the player effects, as opposed to target effects, works reliably, so you can cache the entire table and just use the effects added and effects removed events to update it. So the thing that MinstrelBuff is specifically doing is they want to sort the effects chronologically, and what they're going for here is that ballads always have identical cooldowns, but anthems, and this is the only thing they care about for chronologically, anthems, they want the one that is going to expire soonest on the left. And so we can see this one, what is that? Anthem of Composure has a little less time left than Anthem of the Third Age. And so if we get Anthem of the Third Age and go ahead and re-up it, so it's a more obvious difference. what they're doing every time that effects list changes is they're copying off the effects, sorting it chronologically, so that the anthems can be placed left to right in ascending order of time remaining. As I mentioned, I feel like there are some optimizations that can be made here. For instance, maybe only sort the ballads, sorry, only sort the anthems, not everything. Maybe only sort the things we care about. Maybe only copy the things we care about. Maybe don't copy anything. Maybe once you know the indices of the N anthems, just sort those and anyway. So these are ideas I have. I'm not necessarily putting any into place tonight. I don't think we have enough time for that. But as I look through this function, the word monstrosity wasn't one that came to my mind, Baz, but yeah, there's stuff going on here that I feel like isn't necessary. And one of the things that's hidden through function calls is we're checking is valid ballad effect. Cool, that sounds like a sensible function. We come on in here with the effect name, and then we call self get localization twice for French and German. Each call to self get localization is then dispatched to settings get effect localization names, which used to, this is a change we made last time, used to figure out what the localization is live every time it was called by checking if a German or a French command were valid commands, and if not, were in English. And so last time we went ahead and cached the result of that at least. So each one of these calls is just going through multiple functions in Lua, which I don't know how expensive that is, but they've got to take at least a couple of cycles to get that localization. And so a change I might make is just have a value in settings that we can just go get. Might be a little bit faster. Or a global variable. I don't mind global variables for things that literally cannot change during the runtime of the plugin. And because you have to exit out all the way to the desktop, restart the launcher in order to change client languages, you can be guaranteed that your localization is never going to change until some massive change of the program. The Redhead says, but why isn't valid ballad the name of a skill or plugin? I mean, it's got that alliteration. I like it. The valid ballad. Actually, I feel like that should be a pub in game or an inn in game. Welcome to the valid ballad. Can you help me with something? So each one of these is this thing valid. Instead of doing it maybe a table lookup of, hey, for the current language, what is the thing? We're doing these multiple function calls to get a string value, not an integer value, that we then compare with a different string. And it that is a thing. So don't do check. Don't have separate tables for each language. So that's the thing I'm referencing over here. So, not even strings, sorry. In Minstrel effects.lua, each of the effects are broken out into different tables for different languages, which means from a code perspective, you have to have basically a switch statement checking what about English, what about German, what about French, checking each of these different tables. And that's just frustrating because it doesn't have to be that way. You can just have a nested table where ballad, the ballad damage bonus values for English, French, and German are accessible without special code or extra code, I guess I should say. Don't have separate tables for each language. Use language en de fr as lookup into table. So that's an optimization that I would like, because then these is valid cry skill functions basically collapse down to is this thing equal to this other thing, instead of checking three different things with two different calls to the same function. And so one could hope that internally there could be an optimization that says, hey, you're calling self-get localization, and that's returning, that's calling a different function, which is calling a function which is returning a value. Therefore, I don't need to call this a second time. But the reality is there's multiple functions in there, and I don't think I trust that Lua is going to figure that out, that those are going to return the same thing and optimize out the second call. I think it's going to call it twice. And that just, this isn't an English-centric kind of thing, but doing the call for French and then doing the call for German and then settling on English instead of just doing an order one lookup into a table just feels unnecessarily harsh for the English players, of which I am one. So that's a thing I would like to fix. All right. What else are we doing in here? We have... Oh, no, don't need that. All right, so in refresh effects display, we're going through each effect, and we're getting a reference to the effect that we're working with. I have no problem with that. Makes it a little bit cleaner. Thurlor points out, even more efficient would be to set a global variable valid cry skill names to valid cry skill names fr or en or whatever once at startup. You could definitely do that. Actually, I do something similar for my massive tables for dtracker. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but since I have an audience, so because dtracker has some pretty large lookup tables, they didn't want to inflict on everyone to have the chunky tables, as Linnerotter ever calls. I didn't want everyone to be loading the French and the German. There's no point for that. So instead, there are checks at the beginning of the file, I believe. Let's take a look. So the check is, if get client language is not English, then just return. Don't process this file. Otherwise, set all of these things to whatever. And there's almost 2 megs of stuff in there. And the same thing for the French file, where we come on in and we say, if client language is not equal to French, then return. Otherwise, so unfortunately, the game is still parsing, loading the file, possibly parsing the whole thing. But at least this isn't going into memory anywhere. So, yay. And just, yeah. Now, it's possible somewhere else in code I select which one of these to load. I would hope I do that. That's a thing to think about. But I don't want to derail this too much here. Does dtracker choose which files to include based on language? That's a question for me later. And also, I don't know if you can conditionally import stuff based off of stuff. I don't know if import statements can be controlled that way. If they can, cool. Yeah, Thurlor says, we're talking about one hash table lookup, which is a few CPU cycles. In most cases, efficiency is not the highest priority. Yeah, the reason I'm thinking about efficiency specifically is that the nature of this function is every time an effect is added, removed, or changed, which can happen quite a lot in combat, this function reruns. And so you can think about how... Carlos says, if the amount of time you spend doing an optimization is greater than the total amount of CPU time saved by all users of your plugin ever. So any minstrels using this, anytime an effect changes, and if you're in a combat, if you're in a raid or something, I could believe that effects are changing multiple times a second, right? And so if every time this function runs, you can basically kiss goodbye to 2 frames or 1 frame, or I don't know, right? Like that would it'd be useful to time it to see how bad it is. But if you're running at 30 frames per second and every time this function runs you're down to 29 or 28 frames per second, then that feels like it's worth maybe not copying every effect into a different table so you can sort it so that you can then pay attention to a couple of those effects, right? And also it's a fun exercise, right? Like I play minstrels almost exclusively, and so this is a plugin that I use a lot, and so. When I look at the code, it makes me sad, and I want it to be better. and not to say anything disparaging about the person who wrote it. I think it could benefit from some tidying up is all. Now, I mean, I don't know that it's specifically this plugin, but I noticed doing Tier 3 Naruhel Boss from the Vaults during the Spring Festival, there were times where the game just kind of like was really working, and it felt like times at which effects were rapidly coming in and out. And every time the game would kind of pause as things were happening, which was exactly when I wanted to be able to heal, I was thinking, I wonder if we just copied that effect list 17 times there or something. Anyway, all that being said, nothing is inherently broken with this code, but I feel like there's improvements can be made. And since I use this plugin every time I play almost, it's good for me as well. But I agree, the cost-benefit analysis may not be there, but you know, when you look at LOTRO Interface's website, LOTRO Interface, MinstrelBuffs. If you look at the MinstrelBuff plugin, admittedly, it's been up for 8 years, my goodness, but it's been downloaded over 100,000 times, right? That to me suggests that there is a desire for this plugin. Huh. Oh, that's so funny. I should probably subscribe to the comments on this. How do I do that? Tell me how to subscribe to you. Oh well. I'll have to come back to that. That's awesome. Anyhow, yeah. If we come into the MinstrelBuff without a combat timer, it's been downloaded way less than that. But it has been downloaded a few thousand times. So obviously there's a desire out there for minstrels to have a little bit more, or players to have a little bit more awareness of where their minstrel's at in combat. Anyhow, all that being said, yeah. So we go through the effects list that we copied off and then sorted, and then decide which of them we care about. So for each effect, we check, is it a valid ballad? And if show anthems are true, regardless of whether it was a valid ballad or not, we then check to see, is it a valid anthem? In both of these branches, I feel like extracting that out. Oh no, we only do that if anthem plays less than 6. Okay. And then we're calculating, where the anthems are going and stuff like that. And again, this is a thing where maybe the buff window could control where the anthems go. Because we're calculating the position, is it in the first position, second position, whatever, instead of just saying, hey, buff window, here's an anthem, please do a thing. It's not a very good separation of concerns in my head. That being said, I'm not sure the main window should be doing any of this, but if it is, then knowing exactly where in the window the thing is going to go and then telling the window you will place this there feels like, yeah, the concerns have not been separated out. And then, okay, we check, is this a valid anthem effect? And then we get the anthem position. What else is going on that line? That's a long line. Okay. If we're in fixed positions, then maybe this is position 4, 5, 6, whatever. Okay, and then we're done looking at all of those. If there were a ballad or an anthem, then we cared about it. And then there's some more logic in here, but it's just some quick little if-else checks. Nothing too much to worry about. We have some hiding effects going on, hide all anthem borders. We have a bunch of commented out code, which whatever. Okay, so those are the thoughts off my head when I look at this. Which is, I can't really call it the inner loop, but it is a frequently run piece of code, right? It is the main logic. And these are the things I think of when I look at it. So maybe don't copy off everything. Maybe don't separate out the tables this way so the logic is more complicated. Maybe, as Thurler points out, or have a single pointer at the correct table. And don't even worry about the other languages. That could work too. That would actually be maybe a little bit faster to implement, since we already have the 3 broken out. This would just be a case of 3 global variables, or a couple of global variables, maybe a table that has pointers at the correct other tables. So I like that for Laura's suggestion. You can blame Thurlor when it goes wrong. So yeah, those are some off the top of my head. I think this would be better either from a code perspective or from an efficiency perspective, or both going on. Neat, yeah. Now, one of the things about this is if we had a buff window that understood the concept of, hey, we're reprocessing events, and then here are the things to put into the window, and then we're done. The buff window could then go ahead and just compare times on the a couple of anthems, and if necessary, the funny thing is we're sorting. Even if we're in fixed mode, which is really funny because in fixed mode, every anthem goes into a specific place. You don't sort by time. So they've copied everything off and sorted everything in the hopes that they're not in fixed mode. I assume this predated the fixed mode, actually. I hope. Okay, anyway. Cool. So I've got these. That's something to think about next time. Or the dynamically expanding window, where if you get a 4th anthem or a 5th anthem or a 6th anthem, this window just gets bigger. And that strikes me as a really useful thing, because a lot of people will experience that where they are running with either a minstrel that has 4 anthems. It can happen, I think. Or they're in a party with another minstrel, and so one of you's in heal mode, one of you's in DPS mode. You easily have 4 to 5 different anthems at that point. And so this window could dynamically get bigger or smaller based on the number of anthems that are in play. That would be kind of cool. Anyway, so we'll see if anything distracts me before next week. But that's sort of a path forward that I have, is make it more performant and make it visually better in the case of more than 3 anthems. Because I just don't like the bigger displays. This is my favorite display, and I would like it to look better. So, I guess we have hit the ending time, and I have some pizza waiting for me in the kitchen. So, I would say, if anyone has any last-minute questions, thoughts, concerns, etc., throw them in the chat here. I'm going to get a drink of water here, make sure I'm not missing anything else. Well, thanks, Little Redhead. Yes, today's streamers are me. Since it is not the last Tuesday of the month, how about Wednesday? There we go. There's more streamers tomorrow. Come on back. Neat. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any last-minute desperate comments coming on into chat, so Practical Gaming is also coming Wednesday. Yeah, they stream early from our time. Okay, yeah. Well, that being said, I think we are going to. I wonder where my game went. Oh, there it is. I think that's it. I think that's everything we're going to cover today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins. I hope to see you next week. And until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.